big issues in South Africa is that we've got a skills deficit. We keep on hearing this, business keeps on drumming it, the government admits it, but somehow we're not addressing it.
Well, I think there are a number of issues related to that. I think the one primary issue, which starts even in the school areas, is where there's just not enough career guidance for school leavers, which means that school leavers don't have enough career exploration. They're not aware of all the potential career opportunities available to them. Right. And more importantly, they're not aware of what is the demand in the economy. And as a result of this, they're not able to choose their subjects correctly, they don't enter the right careers, and so when they graduate, they're not necessarily employable. And so hence the skills shortage in the economy.
Dr. McFie, the view from Kenya, we're told that unemployment is somewhere in the region of 2.5 million people, and most of those are young Kenyans. What's the problem there?
The problem really is that our economy is not expanding as it should do. This is entirely due to the leaders of the country, unfortunately. You know, our political scene here is one where people are thinking about their own position. They're not actually thinking about the future of Kenya. I've lived in Kenya all my life. I've been born here. I'm a Kenyan. I think about Kenya, but I would say possibly that many of our leaders are not really thinking about putting in place structures which are then going to lead to job creation.
Right.
I've been trying to speak to the government for about 8 years now about business process outsourcing. If you look at the numbers, we are not in the top 50 countries in the world.
Right.
We're not getting that going. There's a lot of potential there, but we don't have the political will to do this.
I mean, leaders listening to you right now could respond and say that in the last year, about 55,000 jobs were created in Kenya, and that's with Kenya really operating below par at about 5% growth. So with higher growth forecast for this year and the coming years, we could expect more jobs to be created. Is that your view?
That's certainly true, but you see, for example, tourism in Kenya is really a joke when you say compare it to South Africa. We're not really putting our resources at the best possible use in tourism. We have an economy which is in fact based on exports of services. There are a lot of opportunities there, but we're not really grasping the nettle.
Right.
The formal sector in Kenya is a very, very small employer. It employs 2 million people out of a population of 40 million people. Our informal sector, it's got about 8 million people working in it. So the informal sector is a very much more important element, but the economic returns that you get in the informal sector are much, much lower than what you get in the formal sector. Right. So this is where it's most important that we have, for example, political goodwill on the part of all of our leaders. At the moment, we have a crisis really in Kenya. I don't see that it's a very good scene for the next 2 years leading up to our election. So unless we have political peace, we're not going to have this expansion in the economy which is going to provide the employment for young people.
Okay, and very briefly, what role can education play? Because in South Africa, we know that critical to the problem is the quality of education. What's the case in Kenya?
We have an explosion in university education in Kenya. The problem really is quality. We had our situation in South Africa given to us a moment ago. Today, people come through primary school and secondary school in Kenya. All of our learning is by rote. People's expression is extremely poor. To get people to write a decent report is incredibly difficult. Mathematics is one of our, it's a subject which you need to get into university, but the number of people, we have about 200 people finishing secondary school every year. Of those, 5% will get 50% more or up to 50% in mathematics. So our mathematics teaching is dreadfully poor in Kenya. For some reason, I don't understand it. I myself am a mathematics graduate, I've gone into accounting. I know there are many good mathematicians in Kenya, but somehow our mathematics performance is very, very poor.
Right.
So this means that the people coming out of university, they don't have analytical skills, they don't have writing skills, they don't have critical thinking skills.
Right.
That's our real problem.
That also seems to be the problem, according to many experts, Ari Katz, in South Africa, is the aptitude of graduates in the marketplace. The universities are producing graduates, the schools are producing school leavers. It's their ability to perform, and it's those technical skills like mathematics, the ability to communicate, to write, that's also lacking.
Correct. I mean, if you look at the matric results that we recently published, you'd see that there was an increase in the number of learners who obtained a university entrance. However, the number of learners that graduated with mathematics decreased, and that for sure is a problem in South Africa. But in addition to the formal skills of mathematics, literacy, numeracy, problem-solving skills, etc., there's also, we have not succeeded in creating graduates with innovation who got critical skills in terms of innovation and exposure to entrepreneurship.
On this issue, I mean, some would ask, what does it mean to, how do you identify somebody with innovation? Because a lot of that is creative thinking. And yes, the economy requires that, particularly when you're talking about small and medium enterprise development. But that's an innate skill. It's something that the universities, the colleges cannot teach, and yet we're asking them to do so.
Well, I think it starts much earlier than the universities and the colleges. I think it starts in primary school and high school, where you start developing that critical thinking and that entrepreneurial ability at a much earlier age. But even at this stage at university and at colleges, a lot more could be done to encourage innovation, to encourage entrepreneurship, etc. And that's one of the reasons we launched a program called Experience It last year, when we discovered that learners were not able to get jobs because they didn't have experience, but you couldn't get experience because you didn't have jobs. And so it was a chicken and egg situation. So we launched a program using our alumni, the Boston alumni from the last 20 years, as well as corporate South Africa, to give our learners exposure to the workplace.
Right.
And we're hoping that that will give them an opportunity to get gainful employment, as well as to generate entrepreneurship abilities.
Relevance of skills is also something that's been raised here. I mean, some people will argue that people are going to university. I know that people like myself who study in the humanities, there's a lot of concern about us and what are you going to use all this creative thinking and theory for? But an economy that's required, that requires engineering skills, scientific skills, architectural skills, those graduates are not coming out of university, and yet you're getting a lot of people getting university degrees.
Yeah, I think you touch on a great point, and I mean, where from an economic point of view, where it really starts coming out is in terms of competitiveness, is where we as a country are positioned as an investment destination when you look at the skills of our human resources, if you can call it that. If we looked last year, the sort of world, the surveys that came out, we sat at 137 out of 139 countries in terms of outcomes in maths and science. Availability of engineers and mathematicians, another massive problem. And what that does is, for long-term investment, is it really puts you on the back foot when you're competing against the likes of South Korea, against the Chinas of the world, Brazil, you name the emerging markets, who are really focusing on producing quality graduates in that space.
Dr. McFie, issues around relevance of skills where there are universities producing graduates. You mentioned the deficit with regards to maths learning, and we're also being told that not enough is being done to encourage innovation. Is Kenya experiencing a similar situation?
We have a similar situation in Kenya. However, having said that, there are some very, very innovative young men and young women here in Kenya. And I must say, I really take off my hat to those young people. They've come from backgrounds where innovation has not really been something rewarded at all. But today, wow, there are some very, very competent graduates. I think, however, our biggest problem in Kenya is the example which is given to our working population by the leaders of the country. Our MPs do nothing. They get paid an enormous sum, tax-free, every month. This then trickles down to the young people. The young people want to just simply emulate them. And the result is that although we do produce engineers, we do produce architects, we do produce doctors, we do produce accountants and lawyers, but very often the difficulty is that there are no jobs for these people. And that really goes back to the political problem.
You've mentioned the fact, Ari Katz, that it's very important to also have vocational training, as it were, or training inside the workplace. And this is where employers are also reluctant to come to the party, because the amount of time they would spend grooming and the costs of grooming an individual is money that could be used more productively in other areas of investment.
Correct, but I think that the government could do a lot more in terms of incentives to encourage employers to provide opportunities to young people who leave in college or university. And part of that is the Experiencer program that we spoke about. But I think in addition to that, there should also be incentives for creating an environment where companies can create innovation, even amongst their own staff, both for the company and actually for the economy as a whole.
Andrew, your views on this one? I know the New Growth Path does put as one of its proposals incentives, tax incentives for companies that hire young people and take them at entry level, incentives for entrepreneurs, patenting rights for ideas. So the government is starting to think in that way. But there's a bit of a disconnect. We've had these sector education and training colleges that don't seem to have made a real imprint by way of skills transfer. What else can we do?
Yeah, I think the sort of albatross around South Africa's neck is that a lot of the policies are well thought out, but the implementation is poor. If you look at education in general, we sit in the top third of the world in terms of what we spend, right at the bottom in terms of the outcomes that come from it. I think, as Ari said, is the vocational training and the transition between being a student, which we remember when we were there, was a very different story to when you go into the working world for the first time. And I think very often is there's just people are left to flounder, and very quickly you just become another statistic who's unemployed into infinity.
Let's talk about solutions. Dr. McFie, a final comment from you. Yes, there's a problem with Kenya's leaders. They're not providing a very good example, and they're not providing the leadership that's needed in terms of solutions. But what else could be done technically by the private sector, by the students themselves, by the universities to improve the situation?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is to be ready to take a lower level of profit. We're really operating in a high-cost economy in Kenya. Things are very expensive here. But the people in business want to make a level of profit which is exceedingly high in many cases. If those people were ready to take on people so that as a result of having work experience, they then can get a job in the United States and Canada. I've got past students going from San Francisco in the United States to Sydney in Australia, including South Africa. So this probably is our best way. If we can export our really competent personnel so that we create a space for those youngsters coming up who can then replace them, and that has got to be a continuous process, I think.
Ari Katz, a final comment from you. Solutions?
I think greater cooperation between commerce and industry on the one hand and educational institutions on the other hand to provide learners with experience and to also manage the expectation gap of school leavers and learners who leave in college and university, so that they understand that a formal job is not necessarily the only opportunity out there, but innovation and entrepreneurship is an alternative.